So you've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about how to tell a story, right? Because
Yeah.
in all these different mediums, what makes a good story?
Whew, that's a good question. Um, it's a really good question. um, I don't think there's any one way, but I do believe that most of us are given somewhere between 7 and 10 stories. And I think a lot of us in the world sort of gravitate towards three. And it's why we see the same stories sort of pop up again and again in popular culture, because there are a lot of the things that we can latch onto, resonate with, and sort of take away from as a collective. So, like your heroes' journeys, like your Star Warses, your Marvels, all those kinds of things, where there's like these fantasy worlds, and then there's these grounded heroes trying to go through and learn and grow and become who they believe that they hope to be. And that's kind of one of the few handfuls of stories that people can tell. But it's not the only ones. And I highly encourage this for anybody trying to figure out how to express themselves through an artistic medium, is really try and figure out what are the stories that you are gravitating towards and you feel compelled to tell and share, because you're going to spend the rest of your life refining those stories down to the best possible versions of themselves. And you might think that they're perfect the way they are the first time around when you put those things out. Like, no doubt, I'm going to revisit Day by Day, the EP as a whole, and think to myself, oh, there's a new twist in the story that I had in my life that now changes the perspective of one of the songs entirely and
Hmm.
flips everything on its head and transforms the way that I think about it. And I could express the story in a new and exciting way and make it even more perfect than I thought it could ever become. So you're never finished with those stories.
Yeah, when you said 7 to 10 stories,
Yeah.
how did you come up with that number?
Um, I had read somewhere, I don't remember specifically where, but somebody said like seven stories, like there are seven big stories that we all kind of connect to and gravitate with, and that most people tell like on a subconscious level without really understanding like maybe the mechanics behind it. It's like that whole thing of like, have you ever read The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell?
No, I have not.
Essentially what he guides you through in that book is this concept of the monomyth, and it goes through these various stages of how the quote unquote protagonist or the hero grows and develops, hits the big low, finds the secret, and then comes back and wins the fight, and then returns home with the information that they gained. Everybody tells those stories on a subconscious level without even realizing that they're telling those stories. um, and I think we're somewhere I read that we were given like seven stories, or like there are
Hmm.
seven stories where people sort of connect with on like a very deep, like spiritual level. And to me, I think that expands out to, if you're a creator and if you have almost sort of a wheelhouse of storytelling at your disposal. You have about, you're given like 7 to 10 big things in your life that become the focus of your life, and then you hone in on those things and really try to understand how you see the world through those stories.
Something you mentioned before was that we should pay attention to the stories that we're gravitating towards.
Yeah.
What are some of those for you?
Ooh. um I don't think I've discovered them all, but a couple that I have really kept very close and I think I've been able to refine over the years is, one of them is the concept of grief, and one of them is the concept of hope. um Grief in the sense that, we have these journeys of sort of going through the world and finding people who are our people, and then losing touch with them or losing them, be it like through a death or through just separation. And we, as a result of that, sort of just enter this like tumultuous phase where we're grappling with our relationship to that, of like of time passing and growing into something that's completely new and different. And I think I gravitate towards that a lot because there's a lot of change and interesting momentum that characters can go through when they're experiencing grief. I wrote a whole I wrote an a cappella jukebox musical in film school called Stages for my college a cappella group, the Capella. And it was it was tracing the 5 stages of grief that somebody might go through when they break up with somebody, and how they discover that maybe it's not necessarily the outside forces that are causing me to have these issues, but like the inner forces and that are dictating my life, and maybe I can come out of this stronger than I was before. And then I wrote a really silly comedy about this private eye gumshoe detective from like 1945 who gets locked in a freezer and is frozen 70 years into the future, and wakes up, and all of a sudden his world is completely shifted. All the people in his life that he once knew are gone or old. So he has to handle, and it really becomes like this meditation on grief and understanding, like, I have to move on. I have to learn how to move on with new sets of people around me, new experiences, new things, and being able to embrace that and understand that, like, this is just the natural process of how we live and how we go through the world. We have to keep going in the face of very challenging obstacles like losing loved ones.
And you also mentioned hope as a story.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think they go hand in hand a little bit. Like, with the Day by Day EP, for example, a lot of that is a journey of my relationship with time as it pertains to my childhood, and how chasing a specific thing as you grow up, and then you get out of college and you're kind of in this new world, and then suddenly there's just this massive question of what next, going back to the whole career thing.
Uh-huh.
um, you're suddenly faced with just a million different decisions and a million different paths you can take. So you would think like, oh, I'm going to gravitate towards the things that I sort of held on to in my childhood. But then you realize that those things have changed
Mm.
fundamentally. They shift, like the way in which the way in which the world has shifted has caused you to look at those things from your childhood differently. You've lost loved ones. You kind of grappling with this sense of, now all of these great, incredible memories that were so vivid in your head are just faded Polaroids on a wall somewhere. And then you really have to grapple with this idea of, wow, I was really so preoccupied with the future that I really was not holding on to the past as tightly as I wanted to. So in order to strike that balance, in order to find where the in-between is in terms of like the spark of hope that you can find to keep moving forward, you just have to take life one day at a time. And that's essentially the thesis statement of the whole thing, of like, you asked yourself what my song is that I'm going to sing at the beginning with Find Your Song. And then by the end, you realize that the song that you're supposed to sing is, you're supposed to take life one day at a time. And those stories that you're going to eventually find, the songs that you want to sing, they're going to come to you each day as you're offered the opportunity to do something.
It's
You don't know what
powerful.
what it's going to be, but it's definitely going to be something.